Last time for tonight. It's still Friday night, Saturday morning. I don't even know what time it is actually, but I've been sitting here reading comics. It's this would be the last installment. I cut it into three different videos. One for baseball cards, one for die-cast cards, and now it's time for Troy's comics on Troy's cards, and comics 2. Uh, the issue and actually stack of issues that you see in front of you um, are the 1986 miniseries by John Byrne, written and penciled by John Byrne. This is right after the contract he had with um, Marvel had come to an end. Titus, good morning, Tony. You're still awake. I figured you'd gone to bed by now. Um, but we're gonna go ahead and do the comics now. I did, of course. You guys both commented and watched the other two I did for the baseball cards and the diecast cars. Um, John Byrne, I've always considered one of my favorite artists or pencilers, and really up there as far as comic book writers. Let's see, so okay, so it's only about midnight over there on the West Coast, isn't it? Maybe a little bit later because I don't know what time it is here yet, or not yet, but um, so this was a Superman reboot. I mean, I've never been really a big fan of reboots, and it seems like they do it more often now. But then that's only because I'm here to catch it and realize it. I'm sure before 1986, because Superman in comic form has been around since 1938. So I'm sure they've done other reboots and things like that I'm not aware of. I mean, you don't have a character just go that long and somebody not sit down and want to do their own take on it. Thanks, Tony. I appreciate that. I was reading the comment and enjoy watching your collection. I do appreciate it. But the artwork and penciling by John Byrne is I've always really enjoyed it. He did a lot of stuff with Marvel, and then when he did this series, I got it, and I've always liked the way that his square jaws, the square jaw that he draws, and the way he places a physique. It's something I've always enjoyed. What the way he's done it. The one thing he doesn't do, and you can tell by the cheerleaders in the back in this issue, McFarlane and Rob Liefeld, two other really well known artists, they go overboard with the female physique, let's say, and it's almost a sex sales kind of thing. But I've got right here. He's gonna. They show the introduction of Lois Lane. Saying there's Lois there. It's not over the top. She looks like a human being. So, and this story pretty much does a total reimagining, and actually it's been somewhat used even since 1986 because those of you who watched a lot of the Superman movies and whatnot might recognize these characters, and this is how John Byrne pictured the characters on Krypton. But the one thing he did do that I wish he'd have picked up because there's a big story. Okay, in the cover you've got the executive editor at the time for DC, which is Dick Giordano, and that's his story. And I read it about his talking to John Byrne, and when John Byrne's contract came up with Marvel, him coming to actually pick up this, and this was again a total reboot, Man of Steel #1. And then after this miniseries, he went on to pencil Superman #1. Same thing that Marvel allowed Chris McFarlane to do with Spider-Man. But in the back cover is a letter from John Byrne. It says, I don't know if I can get it in my tripod. I can't. A Superman, a personal review by John Byrne. And this is how the paragraph opens up for the top of the story. It says, Superman began as a television series starring George Reeves. It was first aired around 1957, and the first episode was Superman and the Haunted Lighthouse. Then the character turned up in a hardcover black and white annuals featuring several Superman adventures, along with such luminaries as Rex the Wonder Dog. Later, as Superboy, he appeared in a three-story one-shot that also featured Johnny Quick and Batman and Robin. And I even as I read it just now, and I'm sure I read it back in the 1980s, I was like, wait a minute, that's not right. And his next line is, does this sound wrong to you? Maybe you've heard that Superman was created in the mid-1930s by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. That he first appeared in Action Comics #1, cover dated 1938 June. That he went on to claim his own title a few months later, and over the subsequent years appeared in dozens of different titles, including Adventure Comics, World's Finest Comics, and the Justice League of America. This, in addition to a couple of successful movie serials starring Kirk Allen, and some simply spectacular animated outings from the Fleischer Studios, most of this long before George Reeves first put on the cape. And that's what I remember, of course, being a comic collector. But it was interesting to read what John Byrne had wrote on and how his introduction to Superman went. But after #1, which is the introduction and reboot for Superman, #2 features the love of his life, Lois Lane. And again, she looks like a regular human being. She doesn't have breasts blowing off the page. And that's one of the things I did like. But it was this comic here that was my favorite of the 6-part miniseries. In the third issue, John Byrne does the introduction of the Man of Steel to the Dark Knight. And not only did I say in the same manner enjoy the way he penciled Batman, but what he did with his interaction between the two set Batman apart in a way that the movies never do. It made Batman, just in the beginning, it shows him tracking this thug, and then of course beating him up. This is the Batman, and this story is the Batman the way I always envisioned him. Very physical, violent, very physical to the point of being violent. Seeing this line right here, I can't, she'll kill me. And I'll do a lot worse than that, Bull. I'll hurt you and you'll stay hurt. But then he does the one thing here. It's remarkable. He's actually more afraid of her than he is of me. And you can, you read that and you realize that it's to Bruce, it's incredulous that there'd be a low life criminal element that would be more afraid of, let's say, his criminal boss. And again, it's how he set apart, how John Byrne, not he, but how John Byrne set apart what the crime as it was in trying to draw a picture or paint a picture of, and this is of course through the writing, not through the penciling, or the drawing, but he tried to paint a picture of what Gotham was and the crime in Gotham. So then when you have the appearance of the big Boy Scout, it shows that Batman is aware of who he is because, again, he's the greatest detective. the world's greatest detective. So he knows who Superman is. And right here, Superman has him dead to rights. He's actually got his bat line. He's going to take him over to the police because Batman operates outside the law, and Superman is the big Boy Scout. But then, just by letting go the line, he disappears. And, right here, the line is, he's a superb athlete and an intuitive genius by all accounts. But I read nothing to suggest he could fly or move at super speed or turn invisible. And Batman replies, invisibility is a relative thing, Superman. Sometimes all it requires is wits and a matchless knowledge of the city. So it's Batman doing what he does, and the one thing that the movies never allowed him to do was to be a genius. Excellent book. I mean, the stance between the two of them right there, toe to toe, Batman and Superman. Just super. I mean, I did like as far as the cowl went. How Byrne did the extra tall ears on the cowl. And this was one of the first times, along with Frank Miller's drawings, that you showed the bat emblem on the chest plate of the costume without the yellow ring on it. And I've always believed that the yellow ring worked, and I almost can remember it being in a Batman comic where the yellow ring was supposed to be basically a target, because the only unarmored part of his costume is the lower part of his face. It's in the cover to you. Mini Golden Age Batman, Spider Man. Yeah, those are great books. But the yellow around the bat emblem on the chest plate was to go ahead and give armed criminals something to shoot at. That was, again, it's a chest plate. It's armored. The costume itself is armored in that position to keep them from being shot in the face. So when Byrne did this, and of course Frank Miller did the same thing in his Dark Knight series, they took away the yellow, and actually it's pretty much been gone since then. And in terms of a costumed hero and being Batman, it it was one of the things it was probably one of the only things in the Byrne comic that I didn't like at all. That he just went ahead and took that away. Other than that, I love the way he did the utility belt and everything else. And this is definitely, like I said, um, my favorite comic of the series. And then after John Byrne did take over the Superman series, I did collect the first few of those. Saying this is the Frank Miller utility belt with the pouches and everything, and then the belt that they drew using in issues 404, 5, 6, and 404, 405, 406, and 407, I believe, which were the Batman Year One reboots in the main Batman series. They used pouches, which made more sense. But this right here, with the small capsule things, is the that's the utility belt that I recognize from the original Batman stuff. But to go through the rest of the books, of course, Batman are number 3. The rest of them I'm gonna leave in the sleeves. This is Superman and Lex Luthor. I don't know if you can see it, but right here at the top of the thing it says Lex Luthor Strikes. Then number 5, The Beast Within. Now it shows the S the right way, and it shows, you see the white fist punching him, the white neck and everything, but the S right here is the right way. It's not backwards. And I didn't pull this one out to read it, but it does appear that this is Bizarro. and then the last issue is Lana Lang, Return of Smallville, the epic conclusion. And actually, not only did they kick off a Superman, a new Superman series um, with John Byrne after this, but they also did a Smallville series, and then they did the People of Krypton or Krypton, I think. Maybe it was the Planet Kyypton, but they did a Krypton series that he wrote and penciled, the Smallville series, and then the regular mainline Superman series. So John Byrne at the time back then, he stayed awfully busy. But yeah, like I said, he was one of my favorite comic book pencilers. I'm sorry, pencilers. Definitely top five, and same thing, top five writers, along with McFarlane and what he did with the X-Men series and the Simonsons and stuff like that. But there you have it. I think next time we do comics, I'm gonna have to dig out what is probably my favorite comic from when I was a teenager. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a fellow by the name of Paris Cullins. He was another penciler that I really enjoyed. Looking at his artwork, and the comic was The Blue Devil. So hopefully next week we can go ahead and break out some more comics and do the same thing. I'll break it into 3 different videos. Um, I don't have any. But, um, oh, you have this one, Titus? Excuse me, I'm sorry. Um, no, I remember when grading came into place. I think it was what late '90s, early 2000s, I believe, when CGC Comic Grading Company, I think it was, uh, first showed their face, and I wasn't even collecting baseball cards back then, and now I look at the grading of baseball cards the same way I looked at that. Um, Baseball cards is not quite as bad, but I remember when the company came to introduce themselves, they're like, um, they take the comic and they slap it in this like you said slab, this enclosure, and you never get to read it again. So as a comic book collector and basically a teenager trying to collect comic books, um, I was like, well, wait a minute. So you want me to buy 2 issues of everything? And at the time in the mid '80s, Marvel and DC were killing us with this whole crossover thing. You couldn't collect just one book. If you wanted to follow a storyline, you had to go ahead and get books across the the whole list or line from the company. Uh, Characters were jumping in, and then to even make it worse, Marvel went to bi-weeklies. They were doing 2 issues a month. I could just imagine what it was like for the writers and the pencilers. Saying, just the same here. I don't grade. And back then with the comics, there was the whole point of, buying 2, not being able to read them, or slapping your book and not being able to read. It was like, no, my books are well read. And for my cards, you're right. You have to pay to be graded, but I think they take away from the hobby. They take away from comic book collecting in baseball cards. They take away from baseball card collecting, because then it's all about how much can I get for this item, not the penciling, not the story, and the baseball card, not definitely not the player, unless of course he's a big high dollar player and blah blah blah. But the whole grading thing is like, my card's better than your card because it looks prettier. I said, dude, I've got a set of 720 cards to make 1 year of baseball. You turn over the stats, and every one of those players have the stats from last season along with the rest of his career. Put that together with his teammates, and you get a picture of what the game of baseball looks for that time. Oh, I wouldn't doubt that they already have it. Actually, I know they've got it for the Star Wars miniatures, Star Wars figures. They have grading for those. So I don't get it. But Guys, I appreciate you hanging out. Actually, I do believe the one comic I said I didn't read, the number 5 issue. I think I'm gonna get off and take a look at that one because I don't remember what the story is for that one. Probably reread the Lex Luthor comic also. So I appreciate you hanging out with me, Titus, Tony. Titus, it's the middle of the day over there for you, but Tony, man, get some sleep, brother. And I will go ahead and catch you guys later. Again, take care of each other. Be well. Guten Abend and tschüss.